If there's one thing that I love doing on this channel, it's sharing some of the amazing, creatively talented designers that are out there creating 3D models for you to download and 3D print. And today I have one that is so spectacularly awesome that we're gonna be taking a look at. And I love all things action figures, so it should be no surprise that I'm jumping all over this project where we're gonna be 3D printing our own action figures. And these just aren't any action figure. This is arguably the most popular 3D printable action figure that you can find online. And I'm talking about none other than the Dummy 13 3D printable files by Soozafone. They just released the first official version of this figure. It was previously in beta and had gone through multiple iterations. And I think what makes this file so popular over everything else is that it's print in place, no supports needed. It's relatively easy to print and snap together. But the community has really gotten involved with this set of files, creating tons, and I mean tons, of 3D printable mods for these different action figures. So I figured what better way to actually showcase this by printing multiple different variations of this action figure in different sizes. So we're gonna print these at the 100% scale, 150%, and the 200% scale to see which size might be the optimal for you to run off and print these on your own. Now, in order to print this, there are some guidelines that Soozafone has included in the post on how to properly print these on your 3D printers. And to get the best results out of these, you're gonna end up printing two different sets of files. One is for the actual body of the figure, and then the other is for the armor or the clothing or whatever you wanna call it that they're gonna end up snapping on top of it. Now, for the body portion of this, you're gonna want to end up using PETG or ASA. In this case, I'm gonna be using PETG for these prints, and then for the actual armor pieces, we can print those straight up in PLA. So in order to print these, we are gonna need to adjust some of your settings inside your slicer so that these print properly. The first thing that we're gonna wanna look at is your layer height. The first initial layer, we're gonna wanna print at a 0.2 layer height, and then all the other layers, we're gonna be printing at a 0.15 millimeter layer height. Your perimeters or walls, you're gonna leave at 2. And then for the infill, we're gonna be using this 20% infill as an option. Another thing you might wanna consider is your initial layer speed. You might wanna slow that down by at least 25% if you're having any difficulties getting the prints to adhere to the bed. Another setting that I've never really played around with is elephant's foot compensation, which you're gonna wanna set to 0.15 millimeters. You don't need supports with this, so you can turn those off. One other setting that you might wanna consider enabling that they recommend is printing the external perimeters first. And again, for the core body parts of this print, you're gonna wanna make sure that you're using a material that's pretty durable, like PETG, ASA, or ABS. And to get these printed, we're gonna be running them over on the Elegoo Neptune 4 and the Neptune 4 Plus, which just so happens that Elegoo is the sponsor of today's video. If you weren't already aware, Elegoo's running their Elegoo Day birthday promotion, which is running from now through the end of October, where they're not only having sales online on their website, but they're also running a massive contest where you can win some 3D printers, including their brand new up and coming Elegoo Centauri, which is their new Core XY 3D printer that I'll hopefully be able to start sharing with you all here very soon. And for a lot of the body parts that I'm printing, I'm using Elegoo's filaments, including their PETG and PLA. If you're interested in more information about any of Elegoo's printers or their Elegoo Day contest, you can find more information about that linked below. Yeah, I 3D printed a whole lot of these. I kind of went a little overboard, but these are rather fun to print, and I wasn't quite sure what color combinations I wanted to go with. And I'm using the black Elegoo PETG for the base body parts. And what's again really interesting about working with PETG is you're going to want to make sure that you're heating this as best as you can to help reduce any of the stringing that you might see from it 3D printing. Soozafone has also provided a variety of different file format options for you to 3D print these with. You can see here that I ended up going with the peg board option here. It's going to use a little bit more filament, but it's going to help ensure that all of the parts stay on the bed and nothing quite lifting up in areas. But if you did have any particular parts that ended up not adhering to the bed or printing properly, he's provided all of those as individual print files that you can just individually run off and 3D print as you need. Now, with all these parts that you're gonna need to have printed, you also need to actually get this thing assembled. And thankfully, Soozafone has a really beautifully illustrated guide on how to actually assemble the figure. But first things first, we actually need to trim away all of the sprues or the plastic bits from our figure. And check this out. These are wildly fun to play with. The assembly process takes a little bit of time. You gotta just be very patient and get everything separated. And then once you get it all snapped together, these are so wildly articulating, and you can get some really crazy poses with these. And because they're printed in PET G for the frame of the body, they're pretty stiff with all of the joints and all the articulation points. Another really fun thing that you can do is mix and match the colors. So I ended up printing two different the outer body parts here in two different colors because I wanted to be able to mix and match some of the colors here. This honestly kind of looks like a Scarlet Spider-Man here. But one cool thing about this is there's also some of those accessories I was mentioning. One of those being the primary one that you want to print is going to be this stand so that you can pose and have your action figures in all sorts of crazy positions and action scenes. And I ended up printing these in 3 different sizes, as I mentioned before. So we've got the 100% scale, which is slightly smaller than one of your typical Marvel Legends action figures. Then at 150% scale, it's very similar to the height and size of what you might see from some of those Todd McFarlane action figures. And then at 200% scale, these are just slightly smaller than what you might find for some of those Hot Toy, crazy expensive figurines. Now with the 3 different sizes that I ended up printing, I have to say the one that I think I'm enjoying the most is the 150% scale. This has a great mix and match of not only the size, but also the joints feel like they're a bit stiffer and hold a little bit better than the smaller iteration here, where this one feels a good bit looser than the larger ones. But also the medium one here was probably one of the easier ones to assemble, where I wasn't worried about breaking anything, versus the larger one. There were definitely some hard joints there that you have to snap together pretty firmly. But if you enjoy 3D printing or action figures or have kids, I have to highly recommend you try and 3D print some of these for yourself. Or if you're interested in 3D printing and selling these, you can do that as well thanks to the licensing agreement with Soozafone for these files. You just need to make sure that you're properly crediting them when actually posting your listings. And make sure you're doing that. This designer deserves all the credit and more. I forgot to also mention that I printed a female version of the figure as well. There are a few different body part options that you can print to add to your figure. And take a look at this last minute addition. I wanted something cool to take some photos with for the figures here, and I found these photo sweeps by SH Designs, but the problem was this one wasn't exactly tall enough. So I scaled it up ever so slightly, and we now have, after 17 hours, a massive version of this that fits the larger figures that we printed here. And you'll see where I ran out of some filament and had to do some color swaps, and I kind of like the different color transitions there. Just something fun that I wanted to print and add to this little project here. All linked down below. These figures are just so much fun to play around with. There are so many points of articulation on them. It honestly kind of reminds me of some of these old school figures called Stykfas that I used to be able to play with, that you could find that were these blank figurines that you were super highly posable, but they were really tiny compared to these awesome ones that you can just print for yourself. I also want to take a moment to say a big thank you to all my Patreon supporters for your continued support of me making videos like this one here. If you're interested in things like the 3D printer settings that I use to 3D print these over on my Neptune 4 and Neptune 4 Plus 3D printers, you can find those over in my Patreon. These figures are so much fun to print and play with. I 1000% recommend downloading and printing these for yourself. Let me know in the comments what you think of these, and if you think I should try and print a giant version of this over on my Elegoo Orange Storm Giga. Hey, thanks so much for watching, you all, and I'll see you next time.